Claude Levi-Strauss transformed how we think about human culture in the mid 20th century. His work created a major shift across anthropology, literary criticism, sociology, and philosophy. To understand his approach, you must first grasp his key methodological move. He took the tools of structural linguistics and applied them to culture. Levi-Strauss was deeply influenced by Swiss linguist Ferdinand de Saussure and Russian linguist Roman Jakobson. Saussure made a crucial differentiation between langue and parole. Langue refers to the abstract system of rules and grammar that makes language possible. Parole refers to the actual words spoken by individuals in daily life. Levi-Strauss saw that culture works the same way. The customs, rituals, and stories that anthropologists observe are like parole. They are individual expressions. The real task of the anthropologist is to uncover the underlying language, the hidden grammar that generates all these surface variations. Cultural phenomena, from marriage rules and kinship systems to cooking habits and myths, are not random accidents of history. They are surface expressions of deep mental structures that are hardwired into the human brain. This means that structuralism shifts attention away from what a myth or ritual literally says toward how its underlying elements are arranged and related to each other. Levi-Strauss first applied his structural method to family organization in his book, The Elementary Structures of Kinship. He challenged the traditional view that kinship is primarily about blood relationships. Kinship is a symbolic system of communication and exchange. He introduced the atom of kinship, which he considered the smallest unit needed to build a kinship system. This atom consists of four roles: brother, sister, father, and son. The maternal uncle or mother's brother holds a special position in the structure. His presence shows that relationships are not just isolated two-person connections but form an ongoing web of social obligations that spans generations. The incest taboo became central to this theory. The prohibition of incest is not a biological instinct or a moral development. It is a structural necessity. By forbidding marriage within the immediate family, the incest taboo forces groups to look outward. This insight led to his alliance theory. Rather than seeing marriage as just a way to reproduce, Levi-Strauss defines it as an exchange of values between groups. Women function as the ultimate gift in this exchange. By giving women away in marriage to other clans, a group establishes peace, creates social networks, and builds lines of communication. Culture is thus born from a structural rule that demands reciprocity and exchange over isolation. In his later work, Levi-Strauss turned his structural lens to mythology. Myths behave exactly like language. They are made of basic units that follow strict structural logic. He coined the term mytheme for the smallest unit of a myth. A mytheme is typically an action or relationship such as Oedipus kills his father or Antigone buries her brother. A single mytheme has no meaning by itself. Meaning comes only from relationships. A mytheme gains value only when it is placed in opposition or alignment with other mythemes within the whole myth system. This is why Levi-Strauss insisted on reading myths in two dimensions, the diachronic and the synchronic. The diachronic axis is the chronological sequence of the story as it unfolds over time. The synchronic axis groups together events from different parts of the story that share the same underlying relationship. He used the analogy of a musical score to explain this. An orchestral score must be read horizontally, following the melody across time, and vertically, looking at the harmony of all instruments playing at once. Myths work the same way. When you break a myth into vertical bundles of relations, the deep structural themes become visible. At the center of Levi-Strauss's theory is the idea of binary oppositions. Drawing from structural phonology, which showed that speech sounds are distinguished by absolute contrast, he argued that human brain naturally possesses reality through pairs of opposites. Examples include nature versus culture, raw versus cooked, life versus death, and high versus low. These binary divisions reflect absolute contradictions that create psychological and social tension. The primary function of a myth is to provide a tool that can manage or soften these tensions, because an opposition like life versus death cannot be easily resolved. The myth introduces a third element, the mediator. Mediators are symbolic characters that occupy an ambiguous middle ground between the two extremes. For example, in many indigenous American myths, the coyote or raven acts as a mediator because it is a carrion eater. It eats meat like a predator but does not kill its own food like a herbivore. It stands structurally between hunting and gathering. The trickster figure also serves this role. The trickster is neither fully human nor fully divine, neither entirely good nor entirely evil. It moves freely across boundaries and neutralizes social anxieties through its ambiguous nature. In his work, The Savage Mind, Levi-Strauss mounted a strong critique against Eurocentric theories that claimed non-Western societies were primitive or pre-logical. The human mind works with the same structural logic everywhere. Traditional societies think just as sophisticatedly as modern scientific cultures. The difference lies not in the quality of intelligence but in the materials available to that intelligence. He introduced the concept of bricolage. The bricoler is a resourceful craftsman who uses a closed toolkit of scrap materials to solve problems. When faced with a challenge, the bricoler looks through the available inventory, rearranging and repurposing elements to find a creative solution. The modern engineer, by contrast, invents specialized tools and works from systematic, pre planned designs. Levi Strauss emphasizes that bricolage is not inferior to engineering. Both use the same mental operations of sorting and classifying. Traditional myths function as intellectual bricolage. They take the natural elements available in the local environment, like animals, plants, and rocks, and organize them into complex conceptual systems to explain the universe. The quality of thought is the same, only the toolkit differs. Levi Strauss's greatest empirical achievement is his 4-volume Mythologics, which maps hundreds of indigenous myths across the Americas. Across these volumes, he demonstrates that seemingly independent myths are actually variants of one another. They transform systematically as they travel across geographical spaces, shifting elements while keeping their core structural relations intact. In his work, The Raw and the Cooked, he introduced the culinary triangle to show how food preparation mirrors deep structures of human thought. The triangle maps 3 states: the raw, the cooked, and the rotten. The raw represents the unaltered state of nature. The cooked represents a cultural transformation, that is, human intervention using fire and techniques to alter the food. The rotten represents a natural transformation, that is, food decomposing without human intervention. He further showed that roasting, which brings food into direct contact with fire, sits closer to nature, while boiling, which requires water and cultural embodiments, sits closer to culture. Even our everyday cooking preferences are organized by an unconscious structural grammar. A defining feature of Levi-Strauss's structuralism is its rejection of the philosophy of autonomous individual. The goal of the human sciences is not to constitute man but to dissolve him. This challenges the idea that individuals freely choose their own thoughts and actions. The individual is always shaped by the system. You do not invent the language you speak, the kinship rules you follow, or the myths you inherit. You are simply a point where larger objective social structures express themselves. Nowhere is this clear than in his famous formulation about myth creation. Myths think themselves through men without their knowing it. An individual storyteller does not consciously invent a myth, rather, the unconscious structures of human thought use the individual mind as a stage to work through structural problems. Human subject is transformed from an active creator into a vehicle for the self unfolding of structural patterns. This insight laid the groundwork for later ideas about the death of the author in literary theory, shifting focus away from the biography of the writer toward the internal mechanics of the text.